You've probably never heard of Poveglia Island, just a scrap of land nestled in the Venetian Lagoon, less than half a mile from the Italian mainland. No tourists go there, boats give it a wide berth. The locals, superstitious, practical people, don't even say its name after dark. But I said it, and worse, I went there. My name is Jonathan Reyes. I'm a doctoral student in European history, focusing on plague infrastructure in medieval cities. And when I heard that the island of Poveglia had once served as a quarantine zone, I thought it would make a perfect case study. But what I found there, no thesis paper could ever describe it properly. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the history, to the facts. Maybe then you'll believe the rest. Poveglia has always been a place of death. In 1348, when the Black Death swept across Europe, Venice, like many cities, established lazarettos, plague islands where the sick and dying were shipped off in boats. Poveglia was one such place. There are records, still preserved in the Archivio di Stato, that speak of the bodies, piles of them, tens of thousands dumped into pits. Some were burned alive. Historians estimate that over 100,000 people may have died on the island over the centuries. Bones still wash up on its shores after storms. But that's not the worst part. In 1922, a mental hospital was built on the island. Not a hospital in the modern sense, a towering stone building where the criminally insane were locked away and forgotten. The official records stop in 1946, when the hospital was shut down and the island declared off-limits. What happened in those final years has been buried under a shroud of silence and fear. This was the history I wanted to document. I arranged a brief research permit through the University of Padua, nothing formal, just enough to get me onto the island for 2 nights with a hired boatman and some basic equipment. Everyone tried to dissuade me. One archivist at the university made the sign of the cross when I mentioned my plans. "You'll hear the bells," he said, "but there are no bells on Poveglia anymore." It was late October. Mist rolled off the water like smoke. I'd hired a fisherman named Luca to ferry me across, and even he hesitated at the edge of the island. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the ruined hospital looming beyond the tree line. "It's not a good place." I smiled, trying to hide my own unease. "It's just a story." Luca didn't smile back. "Don't call it that. It hears you." And with that cryptic warning, he pushed away from the dock and left me alone. Poveglia is small, barely 17 acres. The vegetation has gone wild since the abandonment, thick with gnarled trees and vines that look almost skeletal in the grey light. The buildings were worse. The hospital tower still stood, its upper stories sagging inward like broken teeth. Windows gaped open, hollow and black. I made camp in the old infirmary, setting up my sleeping bag amid crumbling tile and rusted gurneys. As night fell, the temperature dropped unnaturally fast. I could hear the wind moaning through the halls, but beneath that, I thought I heard something else, whispers, too low to make out, rhythmic, almost like chanting. I told myself it was the wind. I spent the morning documenting the old hospital's layout, taking photos and sketching what I could. The morgue was the worst. Metal slab tables still stained from use and shelves full of empty medicine bottles. One wall was covered in tally marks, hundreds of them, carved deep into the plaster. In the chapel, the floor had collapsed. A thick, ashy residue covered the stones. I knelt and picked some up, sniffing it. It smelled of burnt meat, cremation ash. And then I saw something that chilled me more than any ghost story ever could. A medical record book, half eaten by mould, but readable. The last name entered was Dr. Adriano Barozzi, psychiatrist, dated 1942. The note beside his name was short: obsessive behaviour, believes island is alive, shows signs of paranoia, subject to isolation. The doctor had become a patient. The central tower was once used for observation, but locals called it the campanile. A bell had once hung there centuries ago before collapsing in a storm, but that night I heard it. The first chime came at 2:13 a.m, clear, metallic, impossible. I sat up in my sleeping bag, heart pounding. The wind had died. The air was thick and humid, as if the whole island were holding its breath. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging. I grabbed my flashlight and moved to the doorway, shining it down the corridor. Nothing. But the sound continued around the corner, down the stairs, into the dark, so I followed it. The basement smelled of mould and something older, something foul. I could barely see through the dust, but I kept walking. The footsteps had stopped, but I felt watched. Every step I took echoed back strangely, as if the walls weren't solid anymore. Then I found the cell, a small room reinforced with iron bars. The door was broken open. Inside, a wheelchair sat facing the wall. There were scratches on the floor, deep, frenzied gouges, and on the wall, written in something brown and flaking, was a sentence in Latin: Qui hic mane si ipsum inveniet. He who stays here will find himself. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard the scream. It was high-pitched, human, and impossibly close. I ran. I woke up cold. My sleeping bag was wet with dew, though the roof overhead was intact. My watch had stopped at 2:13 a.m, the same time the bell rang. I tried to radio Luca, but the signal was dead. My phone was drained despite being on airplane mode. I packed my gear and prepared to leave, but the dock was gone. Not just the boat, the dock was gone, replaced by dense marsh and thick reeds as if it had never existed. I screamed Luca's name, no answer. I wandered the island for hours, but every path turned me back towards the tower. No matter where I started, I always ended at the bell tower. Something was wrong with the island. It wouldn't let me leave. That night, I gave up trying to sleep. I sat in the hospital lobby with my flashlight and a kitchen knife I'd found in the remains of the cafeteria. At exactly 2:13, the bell rang again. And this time, the whispers followed, louder, more distinct. I could almost make out words, names. Alessia, Marco, Julia. Not names from the documents I'd found. I began to feel disoriented. The walls warped subtly. My limbs grew heavy, and then, as I blinked, the hospital changed. The decay vanished. The tiles were white. The air smelled of antiseptic, and they were all around me. Patients, dozens, silent, standing in rows, their eyes covered with bandages, mouths open in silent screams. At the centre stood a man in a doctor's coat, face obscured by shadow. He raised his arm and pointed at me, and then they screamed, a wall of sound, deafening and violent. I stumbled back, and the vision snapped away. The hospital was in ruins again. I don't remember running. I only remember the cold, the feel of wet ash on my skin, the sense that the island was folding in on itself. The trees reached for me. The ground pulsed like a heartbeat. When I reached the shore again, the dock had returned. Luca was there, looking pale and shaken. "You're not supposed to come back," he said. I collapsed into the boat. I didn't speak a word until we reached Venice. That was 3 months ago. I've had the ashes from my clothes analysed. Human remains, consistent with mass cremation. The audio I recorded that night, static. But under the hiss, if you listen closely, you can hear the bell. I tried to submit my research. The university told me they'd lost the permit paperwork. The Archivio denied ever issuing the document I'd found. But I still dream of Poveglia. I dream of the tower, of the chanting, of the island calling my name. I think it wants me back. And someday, I might go.